speak to your customers and you can just build something truly great.
The axis that's like how good you are.
Yeah.
And then the axis of like who even knows your existence.
Yeah.
Right? And you got to play both of them. If you as a person are obsessed with the details, that is much more valuable than waiting another month, making it prettier, better, faster. 70% of people want this thing and 30% want that thing. And it's very hard to decide.
Is an ugly product better than a perfect product? Is an ugly working product better? The answer 99.9% of the time is yes.
Your character. Like your framework should meet your character.
We are back with another episode of the Do As I Say, Not As I Did podcast. As always, this is a startup advice show where we answer the real questions about what's going on in your life and in your business and what kind of fires are you trying to put out right now. So if you have questions and you want us to get to them on the show, send them through to podcast@joelditrapani.com. I'm your host, Joel Ditrapani. And so I get it. That's a hard name to spell, and that's why I'm putting that email address in the show notes for you. But anyways, today I'm super excited to be joined by my friend Wiz, aka Nadav Weizman. Nadav.
Yeah.
All right.
Everyone calls me Wiz.
That's
That's
thing.
why.
Wiz famously goes just by Wiz, like kind of like, McLovin. Like it's just like the one name thing. And even when you look up Wiz on LinkedIn, you find Wiz. It's insane. So
yeah, I had to go through the trouble of being Wiz everywhere now in Miro.
Yeah.
You know, like in Miro, in Figma, in Slack.
Yeah, Wiz is the Wiz. You know, it's just a single name Wiz, which I love. But he was the co-founder and CEO of Cardinal. Cardinal is an opinionated feature backlog. It pulls in your customer feedback, CRM data, and task management issues, and uses AI to assess which customers want which features, how important it is for them, and ties them to your product strategy. Cardinal and Wiz went through YC. Also, Wiz has had a bunch of other exits and stuff like this. This is just his most recent one. He started that business within a year and 3 months. He started it, went through YC, and then grew a lot, built something fucking crazy, and sold it to Miro, which is, if I didn't know Wiz, I would have thought that was a lie. And I would have been like, he must have been working on it for 5 years beforehand. But it happened in a year and 3 months, which is crazy. And now he's the VP of product at Miro, where he specializes on building a new product at Miro, which is very cool, which is similar to Cardinal, obviously. But Wiz is an expert at building products. And because he's gone through building his own businesses and being part of other businesses so many times, I find it really interesting, his approach to how he built Cardinal and why it was different to everything he's done in the past. So mate, welcome. Thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thanks for having me.
Well, tell me a little bit more about Cardinal, or maybe more about what you're doing at Miro right now.
So Cardinal was formed at the beginning of 23. We did Y Combinator winter 23. And we really did come in with like no idea. Like we saw LLMs coming at the end of 22. ChatGPT didn't exist yet, but we saw GPT. And we were thinking about what to do with it. What we've experienced through our career building products, mostly not in SaaS, by the way. It was like our first attempt at SaaS. We've always been amazed by how freaking hard it is to like build stuff, choose what to do, align everyone. You know, it sounds so trivial, but it's so hard, especially in software where everything's possible. Like you can redo the whole thing tomorrow. Yeah. So it was interesting to see this thing, this LLM, able to give you answers, to review a lot of words and come up with something. So that was interesting. But we went into YC with like, hey, we're Wiz and Marcela, my co-founder. We want to bring AI to product teams, but we don't know exactly what we want to do. Like, let us in, right? And everyone else had like these pitches. And we got in and we needed to like formulate something, right? Yeah. And we did, and we kind of half pivoted. But the point was that we were just in love with the problem. We weren't tied to the solution. We just knew it's freaking hard, and it's hard for everyone. And it kind of reminded us of like, what did the world look like before CRMs or before Jira or task management, right? Like everyone had the same problem. Everyone built their systems or processes to solve it. And they were like 80, 90% the same, right? No one just put out a solution out there to capture it and allow them to configure or not. So we're at the same phase in product management. It's fairly a new profession. Everyone is kind of doing the same. And yet it's very different every company, and it's painful, right?
It is always painful.
It's always painful. And then through YC, we found Rob, we found the concept of the mom test, which is a book. Yeah. You told me at the end that we might, like, I recommend something.
Yeah,
like, that's
you
my
can plug the whole way through.
recommendation,
The mom test.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
We even spoke to him at some point about
really?
our learnings. He was great about it. And it's really amazing, the concept of validating your idea without telling the person you're talking to anything about what you're doing, right? And we took it to heart, and we met like dozens of teams, and we were like, what's the 3 things that pain the most? And like everyone, product leaders, everyone said the same thing, right? Like choosing what to do, aligning everyone on it, and attaching the user voice or some qualitative way to take all these opinions into account when we choose to do a thing. So it was like amazing. Like we knew we loved this problem. So we just ran with it with passion, and we were very lean. It was just me and my co-founder for most of the way. And I think at some point we were just starting to be noticed by Miro and others just because we were really into providing value, which sounds very obvious. Yeah. It's also like the obvious YC advice, you keep hearing it. But we just actually went with it. We just always thought, not would it be a good marketing thing, would it be sexy, would it look good, or not what do others do? It was just like, what's the most painful thing we've heard? How can we hack it? How can we solve it? And sometimes we build things just by looking at how they did it. Like someone would show us, we have this notion, we have this automation, we have this, we have that. And we're like, okay, we'll build, it would look just like that. We'll build it for you in our product. It's like, okay, I'll move to you. And we're like, did we just move someone from Notion to us? Like, we love Notion, right? Or Linear, like other examples, right? Not to mention incumbents. I think that's the story. And for Miro, it just fits into the core of what Miro does. Miro also has this amazing DNA of like helping teams build the next big thing or whatever. Maybe I'm not saying the sentence exactly right. And ours was always just choose the next best thing, which is very similar. So I think there's like a good DNA match there and a lot of trust to do something meaningful there. So it's only been a few weeks, I guess, since the acquisition, but it already feels like amazing inside. You know, like we come in and we're like, we want to do this thing. And you don't get like, sorry, buddy, that's not how we do it here, right? Take it slow. Everyone goes, it's not how we do it, but if we were to try to get you to achieve this, we'd have to talk to this person and hack this process this way so it's faster. It's like, we're already seeing like a lot of support for us trying to do stuff, which is cool.
We love Miro. Miro was the first ever sponsor of the show.
Oh, no way.
Yeah.
That's cool.
So we love him. And also Miro is like, I use Miro so much at work. Like it's the main way I work. Miro and spreadsheets are my 2 kind of go-to things.
Yeah, we're tabular nerds. Like our product is basically a giant spreadsheet in a way. But yeah, there's something about the format and creativity that's interesting. I'm only just starting to really learn how teams use Miro, like across many teams and many industries.
Sure, if anyone uses it well, it's them.
They have crazy Miros. Sometimes it's amazing to see the difference of you using your own product and then other customers. Because sometimes it's like disappointing, like, oh, they just drag these things around. It's so simple. But sometimes you meet customers and they're like, they did something insanely complicated and they really care about it. So yeah, I'm enjoying it right now.
It's new to me. One thing that you mentioned before we recorded, but I'm just going to ask you because I think it's insane. How many product teams did you speak to in that 1 year of doing Cardinal?
I think we said it here. Maybe it was on the conversation before.
Yeah, it wasn't part of the recording. So
through the year, I spoke to 600 to 700 probably.
That's fucked up.
Yeah,
like
it's
when
insane.
people say speak to your customers and you can like be successful, that's what they mean. That's a fucking example of it. Like you spoke to 700 and you sold for something, I don't know, pretty fucking meaningful. So it's like speak to your customers and you can just build something truly great.
I agree. And some of them are not, right? But that was also meaningful, right?
Yeah.
If 50 of them are adjacent and I've learned that they're the wrong ICP because I spoke to the CTO and not the CPO, or, right? That's still progress, that's still learning. But you got to be into it. I think before this company, I didn't realize how much go-to-market is important. I was like in engineering. And I always thought like the team is important, the processes is important, the quality of the product is important, which is really true. But if you don't have the other axis, there's like the axis that's like how good you are, and then the axis of like who even knows you exist, right? And you got to play both of them to succeed. So this time I was really focused on being out there, meeting people, right? It doesn't matter if it's investors, founders, customers, but like I was out there all the time, even when I didn't want to. And my co-founder was out there just building stuff on his own like an army, right? And when you do those two things together, then you can really like hit it off.
It's such like it feels like a pure example of like the lean startup almost. Like, ask the questions, find the problem, build it, ask them if it works, build it something different, ask them if that works, build something different, and just kind of like keep on.
I mean, there's also a lot of
iterating.
luck, right? I
guess you did hit LLMs and AI and product management at the right time.
Yeah, I mean, we would have
These
done
waves
it.
came together.
I think we would have done it regardless. We just would have implemented logic and would have ML, right, models for it. So it would have been maybe more logical than open-ended, like prompt engineered. But I think we would have done it anyway because the problem is real, right?
It does feel like maybe product management had matured enough to a point where it was universally understood that the pain sucked.
I agree. I think it's also true for 2 years ago or 2 years from now, right? And 4 years in the life of a startup is a ton. You could die twice. But I just think that like we haven't found market fit, right? We only started selling this year and everything was going up nicely, but it was still super early. We might have, if we haven't sold, learned a year from now that we just can't make it be meaningful enough, or we had like churned customers, which we didn't have yet. So I don't think we, hit it off the park. But I think that you got to meet luck ready to ride it, right? You have to be good to ride it, but there's a world where you're good and you just haven't met it, right? So yeah, I think we're very lucky, very fortunate.
I love it, man. Well, with that, we'll jump into the questions. So today's first question is an ugly working product 10 times better than a perfect product? I'm in the process of developing an app. I know once I put something out there, users will have lots of suggestions and requests on ways to add features and functionality. I want to create something people genuinely find useful. At what point have you decided your MVP was good enough to release rather than waiting for more product improvements? What's the bare minimum you need to launch to start getting user feedback? From Dip AK.
This question is like the gold question, I feel, in startups, or at least in software startup. And I don't think there's like a right answer. Yeah. And generally, I feel like in tech, there's a lot of advice. Like the Reid Hoffman is obvious here, right? Like if you're not embarrassed at it, it was too late, which I love and agree to. But I think the right way to answer it is kind of what fits you as a person, right? If you as a person are obsessed with the details, right? It'd be painful for you not to, right? So you got to find a way to do something that fits you, but is still successful at the end, right? And like in our world, in productivity, Figma and Notion are an example of companies that took years to perfect the product. And their early days, in a way, were different from what they ended up shipping. But they were talking to customers and putting it in their hands, just like in stealth. But they just really wanted to perfect it, right? They wanted it to be simple and clean and beautiful, But there are other examples where people just put it out there and learn from the momentum, which I think is more common, but I'm definitely in that camp. I can tell you what we built in the first month in YC, because we raised money like a bit before YC, so we weren't stressed about demo day and raising. So we shipped like a month before demo day. Everyone else you don't want to do it because if you don't have good numbers, you're stuck when you're trying to raise. And it wasn't great. Like we had like a bunch of companies try us out. We invested in the product, but it just wasn't working. Like we talked to them and they were like, before they use it, they're super into it. They care about the problem. They're interested. But if you look at it bottom line, they're not using it. When you try to learn why, they're not really telling you, or right, something's wrong. And that is much more valuable than waiting another month, making it prettier, better, faster, and then learning the same lesson. And it's very easy for people from the other camp to say, well, because it wasn't so perfect, it didn't succeed. And I don't believe that. I don't believe, if that is the problem you're solving is just not important enough, right? You have to be doing something that someone else would define as painful, right? And if it's painful, even if yours is not perfect, but it's less painful or cheaper or faster, it should suffice, right? And by definition, when you start a startup, you're not aiming at the market. You're aiming at the number I know is like 2.5%, but there's different research on it. But you're aiming at the small amount of people that don't care. They don't just care that much that you don't have SOC 2 compliance, or it's not pretty, or whatever, you have bugs or downtime, but they're okay with it. They're early adopters, they're interested, right? And that's enough. You just need to be good at finding, like I found them on Twitter, right? Which is not something I thought would be the way 2 years ago. But you just gotta understand where your customer is, find them, and then you can get along with it not being perfect. And I think it's a lot more valuable because you can't help it. You fall in love with what you do because it's like a kid, right? Like it's hard and you spend a lot of efforts into it, a lot of your time and talent and money. But then you care about it the same amount, like in reverse, right? Or in return. So you become so in love with it that it's really dangerous to keep optimizing things before there's an external input telling you it's right. What you're doing is right, right? So that's the only way to do it. The only way is to not succumb to, no, but this can be so beautiful. This can be so good, so smart, right? Just like, wow, these 10 people find this thing very valuable. It's not me. This is my baby, right? They think my baby is pretty and should be a model, right? So yeah, I'm totally in that camp. Just don't wait, put it out there. But have a way of knowing, do people care about it, right? Meet the right people, schedule the meetings, cold emails, whatever you need to do.
I'm on the same page. I don't necessarily know the stories of Miro and Figma and if they were perfect when they put the products out, but like if they succeeded that way, they must be like of like a tiny handful of companies that are successful of building something like that. So I just think like the risk you put into that, where if you spend so much time building something like perfect, the chances that you nail it on the first time is so fucking low. Like it's crazy.
I think it's fine if you're that kind of person. Like Dylan from Figma, he just was crazy about doing it in the web. Like, why do I need this Photoshop thing? Why is it not cross-platform? You know, why do you have this native? We can do it in the web. And he had this thing, right? Or
I guess that's a validated idea, though.
Clean. They want it clean. If you're like that, it's fine. But most people, it's not where it comes from. The advice or the opinion of it has to be perfect. It comes because they think if it's so good, then people would come. And it shouldn't be the reason. They shouldn't come because it's perfect. They should come because it's valuable.
But even if you build something that's like, quote, perfect, like perfect for what fucking problem? Like like you might build it and it's exactly as you imagined. And like when you click a button, it loads so quickly and then it goes exactly where you want. There's no bugs. Like, but the chance I just think the chances that is the right thing that someone's willing to pay for is close to zero.
The question is why? Why do you think that is?
I guess like, maybe it's just jaded by my own experience, but like I had to iterate so many times and speak to so many customers before we got to something where like, oh, they're willing to pay for this. Oh, and they're willing to pay more if it's like this. And then they did pay and then they came back and then they got value. Like I just think the chances that you can solve someone's problem immediately and it's in the exact way that they want it. Like, I just don't think you can get every single interaction perfect. So it's like this, it's a myth of getting it perfect before you ship it.
I think the reason is that perfect is subjective.
Yes.
Right? You think you know what... There's the type of a founder which is like the expert or the one who has experienced it, right? If you think of YC, they like people who say, I was the VP of finance and realized this problem is crap and I want to solve it for other VPs of finance, right? That's like supposedly one of the best types of founders. And the thing is that you can come with your own perception of what it should look like and it works, but then you meet one person and he goes, 90% of it amazing, but this 10%, I would change. I would like it to be this way. And then you meet another person, and he wants 90% of it the same way, different 90%, right? It's a Venn diagram, but he wants 10% different. And like, the more you give it to people, the more variance you have, because everyone's definition of perfect is a bit different. And you got to make the call, well, 70% of people want this thing, and 30% want that thing, and it's very hard to decide how to massage it, right? How to react on this input. So I think it's a big part of it, right? Like iPhone is a great product, but everyone likes other aspects of it. People are trash talking it when it came out, right? And someone had to say, a famous someone, this is the way it is. I'm opinionated. I got all the context, but I chose to let these people down and to let these people down, but to make the common denominator happy. And that's how I'm going to approach the market. And that kind of trade-off, it's just very hard. And it's very specific to the use case, to the form factor, to the industry, right? Which is why you gotta love the problem. you got to be fascinated by it.
I love iPhone as an example because, like, I guess you couldn't have had 700 conversations and worked out that's what someone wanted. Like, it just fucking blew everyone's mind.
Yeah.
But I think, like, the chance that your product is an iPhone is close to zero. So it's like, so if you're most businesses, I think just getting out of market is the right choice. If you're the next Steve Jobs, just fucking build it right. Like, build a beautiful
I
iPhone.
agree. I hate when people quote Steve Jobs.
Yeah.
Like, just assume you're not. And
Yeah.
let's go back to the other 99.999%
Exactly, yeah.
of likely outcomes.
Yeah.
Right? I agree with you. Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll wrap this one up. So, Dip AK, is an ugly product better than a perfect product? Or is an ugly working product better? The answer 99.9% of the time is yes. So, build something, get it out in market, just build enough to get feedback and kind of shape it and see how people use it, and then use as much information as you can to move forward so that you can build something beautiful and factually it's solving the problem enough.
And also ugly is like a simplification, right? Ugly doesn't necessarily mean cute UI or pretty UI or not, right? It means you've invested enough in how it behaves, the technicality of it, the scalability of it. There's other aspects, but the point is, like, did you invest a lot in it, or did you kind of hack something together just to see that it works?
Yeah. All right. Well, Dip AK, you've been advised. So we're very short on time, so we're just going to do a speed run question here. So, Wiz, this next question is called, how can I overcome analysis paralysis? I've been brainstorming with my co-founder regarding finalizing which idea to start working on. But the challenge is that we've been looking at a couple of ideas and have been in the process of brainstorming and analyzing their pros and cons. Now we have analysis paralysis and we're spending too much time thinking through each idea and not finalizing anything. One of the reasons for this is that we started a startup in the past, but we realized after a couple of months of working that we weren't taking the right approach and there was a lot of competition already on the market, which was hard to compete. So due to that reason, we're being more cautious and we don't want to lose money this time. How do we overcome this? How do we get started? And this is from Strange Necessary 9098.
It's a hard question. The ideation phase is really hard. There's a bunch of different approaches to it. There's frameworks, there's living in the future. There's kind of like sliding windows of attempts, right? There's the levels approach of do all of them, right? There's a lot. The one thing I don't like is people blocking their future selves. I don't like people saying, we're gonna have a date, and if by that date that didn't work, then we're gonna pivot. And if by that date we can't get 2 customers, then I don't believe in that, because the future version of you will be smarter, and you don't know what it's going to know and learn. Yeah. Maybe they're like, oh, but we almost closed this one, but we need another month to close this customer, right? Like, so I don't believe that should be the determining factor, and a lot of these approaches to ideation do that, like try to frame yourself, time yourself. But I think that, again, should meet your character. Like, your framework should meet your character. If you know you're into the details, then fine. If you know you're just 2 nerds and you want to write software and you want to do a dev tool, fine, right? It should fit you as people, so you have the energy and passion and the ability to be good at it. But generally, I would say that it kind of goes back to the same advice. Talk to people and see what comes up. See what the common patterns are. Understand your areas of interest, your ICP, your industry, and just, again, the mom test, but just ask them without telling them your idea, what hurts? What do you hate? What do you spend too much money, too much effort, too much time on? And what would a good solution would be like? What have you tried to solve it, right? If you're going after the same personas, there's patterns. They will tell you, I hate invoices. Invoices waste my life. Like, they'll tell you something that keeps coming up, right? It's just hard for makers to go and talk to people instead of making, because it feels so good to write code or like to put something, you see it, right? Like, you're like a carpenter of the modern age. And you got to go against it in order to be able to do it successfully and just talk to people, as hard as it is, right? I don't have a magic solution other than that.
I guess, like, I think talking to people, it's definitely the theme of this episode, and I'm deeply inspired to go and change how much I'm talking to people after this as well. So I think if I was in that position at the beginning where I was narrowing it down and I think I had 2 kind of ideas, I hate being too spread. I like going all in on one, but like, you haven't gone all in on one. Like, you're all in on the idea of doing something. So just go and speak to fucking 50 people or something like that. Go and speak to people in both of them.
Yeah.
Work out, like, does one of them interest you more? Does one of them seem like it's a real problem? Like, just always validate more. Like, I just think people need to validate more than they think before they do less than like
I
they
agree.
expect.
They don't understand how much it would cost them not to do it.
Yeah.
Right? But again, it comes from this place of like, I just derive joy from building or doing something, right? And when you're a founder, you're expected to do everything.
Yeah.
You're expected to be like this kind of joker. There's a famous post, it's probably old by now, by Jason from Saster, that he's like, you don't understand that to do like a successful B2B SaaS, or at least to start proper, you only need 10, 20 customers. Like everyone's like, yeah, but I gotta have 10 million ARR, right? But if you can get like 10 to 20 companies using your product, even if this little stupid thing you do for them and they pay you like $1,000 a year or something, that's a lot, because you had to meet 100 to do it or more, right? And 3 wanted this and 10 wanted that, but it didn't work out, But 10 to 20 is quite significant, right? So you could do the same thing without building, right? If you talk to people and 10 to 20 describe the same pain with a lot of passion or hatred, right? With emotion, then there's probably something there. And not because you sat down and you're like Elon Musk or Steve Jobs or I don't know who, and realize the problem in humanity you gotta fix. It usually doesn't work this way, right?
I love it, man. Well, let's bring this one to a close. So, strange necessary. The summary here is you're stuck between 2 ideas. Just go and speak to people.
Yeah.
Work out.
And don't tell them about your idea or want.
Ask questions.
Understand who you think this problem is for, and just ask them about their problems and see if it matches. Right?
And I guess it's kind of like, it's almost the same advice. Well, it is the same advice whether you have 2 ideas or 10 ideas or no ideas. Just fucking speak to tons and tons of people and find those patterns of like very strong emotions. I like that. It's like find emotions, search for emotions.
Not mine. It's the mom test. It's wrong. Yeah.
All right, we're gonna get Rob on the show, I reckon.
Yeah,
we're gonna reach out to him.
Connect you.
All right, we'd love that.
He's great.
Okay, so strange necessary. You've been advised, mate. Go speak to people, ask questions, find emotion, and that's it. That brings us to the last section we have time for, which is plugs. So, mate, what do you got going on? What do you want to plug?
Well, we talked about the mom test. I guess maybe it's a lame plug, but this is my second startup as a founder, but I've been in a bunch of startups and corporates. And I got a ton of crap from founder friends for going to Y Combinator. Not that it's not considered the best, it's considered the best, but the main thing is like you get diluted, or why do you need it? Like, you know VCs know you look good on LinkedIn, you can raise, like why do you need it, right? And I don't think it's wrong, right? I think it's a valid opinion, but especially from someone who hasn't gone through it. But I guess to us, YC gave a lot, not just because of the visibility of everyone thinking, oh, maybe that would be the next YC company. I think there's also a lot more YC companies now than before. It just gave us a lot in like truly the message of do something valuable, right? Like build something people want or need. In a way, our product now does it, right? It kind of helps people to choose what to do, and maybe stems from the same kind of core. And it's not like we didn't have it before. We were never the kind of like killing it, everything is going great. We're always like the down-to-earth real people that say like, yeah, we're trying to do this thing, we're trying to do that thing, very, very bottom line. But there is something about the instillment you get for it in Y Combinator. And you don't waste a lot of your time in Y Combinator with like the partners or whatever. You're building your startup. They don't waste your time. But still, it's always there, right? Like we talked about it before, and how always in your first startup you care about the things. You called it startup theater.
Startup theater,
right?
yeah.
Like you want the office to be cool and swag. I told you we only wore swag for the first time after the acquisition. Which is insane. You're like bothered by all these million things you got to do. And there's like a theme in YC, which is like, just shut it off. Just focus on, are you building something people want? Which I think is gold. It really made our path. So I would totally recommend it. I know it's hard to get in, and some people think maybe you shouldn't do it if you're an experienced founder. But I'm totally for it.
Yeah, all right.
That's my plug.
Read the mom test, get into YC.
Oh, and, which is something I had to do while I was in it. what you're doing here now, having a podcast, is amazing, because whatever you'll do later, there'll be people aware of you. And it doesn't matter if you have 10,000 followers or 100,000, right? And that's something that takes time. The authenticity, the relationship, the brand you build for yourself. If you can do that before you're running on a runway, right, and you're burning money, that's great.
Build a brand.
Yeah, if you're a founder, talking to people is not just doing the mom test or like interviewing them. It's also building relationships. I found it on Twitter and some like product communities, but I really recommend doing it as early as you can, because it's exponential. It looks flat in the beginning, but you got to put in the 12, 24 months.
Yeah, compounds.
To compound.
Yeah.
So
Love it, man.
Plug is like a social network
Yeah.
to build a brand or a network.
I personally rate podcasts. If you want to do a podcast, hit me up and I'll give you all the advice
Yeah.
I got. Awesome, guys. Well, on my side, as always, shamelessly plugging the show. Pull out your phone, 5 stars right now. Comment all the good stuff.
And tweet it out.
And tweet it out, yeah. Shout it out on LinkedIn, shout it out on Twitter. Give it to your friends. And as always, steal a phone. Take a phone, get it on their phone, download. They'll love it too. And thank you to everyone who writes in. We love answering these questions. They're a lot of fun. If you have a question, send it through to podcast@joelditrapani.com. And I've got a booking link in the show notes. So if you've got any questions, tell me what's going on in your life. Give me feedback about the podcast. I love having those conversations. So thank you guys for booking those in. That's it. Thank you, man. Thank you so much for coming on. I've loved it.
Man. Thanks for having me.
One of my first ever
fun.
in-person recordings, which is good.
It's wild. Come to Austin. Austin's
Yeah,
great.
Austin is
Another
fun.
plug.
All right. Well, this has been another episode of the Do As I Say, Not As I Did podcast. We'll see you all next week.